Hello and welcome to FortiGuard Live. I'm Derek Manky, and joining with me again is my good friend and fellow researcher, Aamir Lakhani. How you doing, Aamir?
I am doing well, always living the dream.
Yeah, it's always good to see your face. We talk every day, right? But it's great to do these videos and talk about sort of the latest and greatest updates. Of course, they're always not so great because these are problems we're facing in the industry, but it's good to talk about. And we're always seeing new developments, sometimes a lot of new twists on older themes. And we've been tracking, of course, our outbreaks and our outbreak alerts. We've had some big ones in the past, and we're not going to cover those on this time, like Log4j and the proxy logon bones from last year. But there's been some new developments, particularly at the tail end of Q2, noticeably Confluence, and also with Folina, right, which was attacking the MSDT service. Both of them common theme again: RCE, remote code execution, and wide deployment base, right?
Yeah, it's funny, like RCE's remote code execution or exploits are back. It used to be like a couple of years ago, they were kind of like the golden ticket for malware. Everyone was trying to achieve that, but you didn't see as many of them. And it's kind of been on the wild. I mean, pretty much every attack that I hear about lately has been some sort of RCE. And that's what attackers want. They want to be able to attack you without having physical access to your location or to your system, be able to like have you execute code, maybe go to a website, and all of a sudden they have access to everything.
Yeah, definitely. And it's what we see if you actually go and look at our FortiGuard Outbreak alert, we have real-time intelligence and telemetry that shows that attack curve. And what we're actually seeing with that is two initial waves that happen, right? And that's not surprising, but it's interesting to look at the statistics. Is when we saw the vulnerability actually breaking with Confluence as an example, you can literally see two waves as this goes on. And the waves are, we're talking about maybe a 2-week period, right? So that's a critical time, right, in that 2-week period. And it also coincides with, of course, the patches coming out from Microsoft as well.
Yeah, as you said, anytime there's an attack, there's a little bit of a ramp up. Like when you say you hit a wave, that wave is like increasing, right? Because you see a little bit of ramp up, and then all of a sudden you have the floodgates open. Everyone's testing it. I think this is what happens also when you have a lot of people writing proof of concepts or just testing defense solutions. For example, I think most people don't know, but when you have an IPS signature, you need to be able to test that IPS signature to see if it's effective. So you're testing against attack code. And a lot of times you're testing against proof of concept attack code. And when that happens, of course, attackers, script kiddies, and everyone else in between are basically taking that and trying to weaponize that, see how far it goes. So that's when you have the floodgates open up, and then you have things starting to die down because everyone's catching up. And then you sometimes have this second wave that happens where things get mutated, right? It seems like we're talking about biology more than cybersecurity now that I hear myself out loud, but that's exactly what happens in cybersecurity as well, is things get mutated and other things start happening, and attackers want to see if these mutations are more effective. Can they be transmitted more easily?
Yeah, definitely. But it's definitely a pattern that we see. So again, good news, bad news. And it's that sort of lesson that we keep on learning. Is that, okay, when one of these attacks happens, we're seeing that first initial prominent wave. Again, it's that sort of SLA that we talk about for patch management, right? Because it's that whole theme, what we talked about before. Cyber criminals are hopping on these quicker, that fresh vulnerability, and we're certainly seeing that in the data. That's the bad news, of course. The good news is that mitigation strategy works, right? When these, recommendations to disable services, when patches come out, we're actually seeing a direct correlation of, again, that wave subsiding, meaning that attackers are starting to shift their focus to something else, right?
Yeah, because not only are the mitigation strategies working, but it's also making the attack surface much smaller, because the same mitigation strategies are or potentially stopping future attacks as well, making it much more difficult for that technique to work on other types of attacks. That's really what we saw in the past. For example, when we saw malware that was effective, we saw like dozens of variations of that malware using pretty much the same technique. That's getting harder and harder for the bad guys to do. So now they're switching techniques, and even I would say in some cases migrating away from malware and trying to use services, or trying to like use RCE to like kind of just remotely take over Windows services or other types of services pre-existing on the operating system.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So when we look at that's a good point. How are they using these RCEs? And again, not surprising, but interesting to see is that there are more, from my experience looking at this, with even going back to Log4j, right? It wasn't just about one attack, one binary, one payload that was being put on systems because of one of these outbreaks, right? There's literally multiple campaigns behind this. And we actually released a blog on this, right? With Felina specifically. We observed Rosina, which was, a different type of payload that was being associated with, dropped essentially from that RCE exploit with Felina. And in that case, what was interesting, and you can see the details in our blog, was the fact that it was using Discord, right, to actually propagate the binary. And so that's one of those cases where why Discord, right? Something that's obviously used with gaming and closed channels, but a lot of more of this one-to-one sort of trusted communication. That makes it a good candidate for attackers to use, right?
Yeah, Discord is extremely popular for one-to-one communication, for chat rooms. I know a lot of times, like I've participated in like YouTube live sessions or other types of, even teaching, classes, and we have Discord channels running in the background. So extremely, extremely popular, and a lot of people, in certain channels are participating. There's a lot of information that's usually out there. With Discord, it's pretty common to, exchange files and links and other types of, potential malware as well. Malware authors obviously see that opportunity, and they're using that as basically a delivery method, a delivery channel, because the opportunity is out there. So yeah, Rosina's bad malware. It also happens to be the name of my aunt, Rosina, but that's the next thing.
Yeah, it's a small world we live in, isn't it, Aamir? So the other thing about this sort of theme, like I mentioned this at the start, this sort of old is new, right? We have some of this, like Discord, something that's been around for a while, that is still actively being used, by attackers in one form or another. Another blog we released was on Guloader. This is completely different, right? This is targeted attack on a coffee shop in Ukraine that was using NSIS, which is a Nullsoft installer. You probably remember this because you're old school like me, right? But Nullsoft dates back all the way to Winamp, like probably about 20 years ago, right, from the creation. But it's still being used by malware today because it is still a common, installer platform, right?
Yeah, I still have the Winamp, right when you launch that app, the little saying that they have stuck in my head. So I won't mention it right now. But yeah, you're I was surprised to see that, but not surprised to see more targeted applications, especially with the attack surface, as I said, getting a little smaller. Not surprised to see that attackers are definitely experimenting or specifically targeting, very specific industries or specific businesses for a variety of reasons. I know, like some people say, well, a coffee shop, how valuable is that, right? Well, there's a lot of things that could be going on in the background. First of all, in Ukraine, in a war zone, there's, it could be a community gathering spot. There's other things that are happening out there, and then they could potentially have, connections and, logging into systems, logging into networks. It could essentially be a watering hole attack. So there's a lot of potential opportunity out there. And once again, we don't know what's going on. It could be just an attacker just testing out something as well. But we are seeing this kind of shift away from mass attacks, and we have been for a while, to more targeted attacks and getting a little more specific and granular with attacks as well.
Yeah. And, we were talking about this the other day. Well, we talk about it quite often, but it's, still important to show new examples of social engineering, right? This is something you're very familiar with as a red team pen tester, Aamir. I know that firsthand. But the social engineering is still one of, if not the most effective tactic that we're seeing out there when it comes to trying to evade security defenses. Because even technologies, we've seen this, like multi-factor authentication. These are all great technologies that, yes, mitigate a lot of risk and damage. But again, in an effective social engineering attack, if the user is still following through and authenticating, right? Or if an endpoint through that social engineering attack is compromised and further credentials are leaked, right? Or proxies.
Yeah, I know you laugh because a lot of times we've had this discussion offline. Is like,
Yeah.
hey, how did you like finally bypass the system or get access to the system? And I was like, well, I just asked for it simply. And that's what I'm doing with social engineering attacks is you're just asking for permission. When someone's logged into a system, like if I'm on my PC right now and I'm logged in, there's nothing more for me to do. I'm already logged in. I have access to that. So if I'm granting someone essentially the same access that I have that's already logged in where they don't have to input any passwords, they have access to the system and as well as they can do anything that my account can do. That's essentially what social engineering attacks are, is that you're getting someone to click on a link or run software or reveal information that that you already have. They don't have to do any work. There's usually the technical component of social engineering. It's not like 0 days or anything of that nature. Yeah. You're essentially saying, hey, give me your password. And you're like, sure, here it is. It's the equivalent of opening up a physical door for someone without a badge and letting them in. It works really well. It's always going to work. And it's not, I argue sometimes if it's a security problem to fix because you're going to have access. I mean, if you're going to have zero access, might as well unplug your system, right? You're going to have some access. And I think it's more of a training and awareness issue than,
absolutely.
That's the same thing. Yeah.
I agree completely. Training and awareness, and that's a great analogy. I mean, it's the classic tailgating. Someone's, an employee swiping their RFID card, opening the door and holding it for someone else to tailgate in behind. Now you've introduced a threat into the building, in that case, in a physical security case, or into your network. And yes, there are security guards, there are network inspections, a lot of things, all that stuff we talk about, right? For, exfiltration and once payload is planted into the network, what's the botnet C2 look like from there, and all that sort of stuff can detect it. But in the case of like what we've recently observed of wipers on the rise, and wipers being combined with ransomware, again, that initial threat is becoming much bigger when the damage can already be done, right? Once it's on the network.
Right.
Yeah. And so talking about the social engineering, another blog we put out was on travel scams and threats. Again, not a surprise, but as the world is getting back to a lot more frequent travel now, we're not surprisingly again, and we released some examples on this. I'm seeing a lot of social engineering lures. These are the broad blanketed ones that are being put out there. Things to watch out for, right? On hotel booking confirmations or changes, flight itineraries and changes. Again, we're seeing these combined with a lot of the typical rats, right? Remote access Trojans and payloads that we see out there so that they can actually get that foothold in the network, get credentials, launch further social engineering, targeted, spear phishing attacks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things with travel that's a little different is a lot of travel these days is, recreational travel, not business travel. And when you have recreational travel, you do have this tendency, at least for some people, to not be as loyal. They will look for deals, right? They'll look to a variety of different websites. They'll look at a variety of different deals that are out there. And so you have less loyalty, which means there's more opportunity for attackers to, kind of go under the radar and do some sort of attack, whether it's through a phishing attack or whether it's, for some social engineering attack. They have that opportunity to exploit a system with malware.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, this is something that is social engineering is one of the constants out there in cyberspace that we see all the time, and that's never going to go away, like you said. So I think absolutely it's a training and awareness issue. That's why we talk about it a lot. That's why we release these blogs on that, and we'll continue to do that. So if you want to find out more details on the outbreaks, you can check that on our FortiGuard Outbreak alert page. You can also check out all the details on GULoader, on Felina and Rosina, and all these things that we talked about on blog.fortinet.com, quite often under our threat research category. Aamir, thanks for all your work behind the scenes, for doing what you do. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today. This is Derek Manky with FortiGuard Live, signing off.